It's September 30th, 1943, Naples, Italy. A group of German soldiers race swiftly to this rail yard, for it's their job to destroy this valuable railway junction. 10 weeks ago, when American and British troops landed in Italy, they have been gaining ground, and the Axis powers have been forced to retreat. Since Italy's surrender, Germany stands alone. It's the German soldiers' job to subvert and destroy anything that could aid the enemy. For tomorrow, Naples will fall. One German soldier places charges on every other rail. The other places the charge underneath the driving wheel of a locomotive. The resulting explosion destroys the track and makes the locomotive immovable. In the background, muffled charges can be heard as tank cars have holes blown in them. Interiors of passenger cars are completely gutted. Charges are put in journal boxes and in the fireboxes of locomotives. By the next morning, the entire rail yard is a landscape of twisted, smoldering metal. On October 1st, 1943, the Allied powers capture Naples. 1861, the start of the Civil War. The railroads, which will be a key to victory, are targeted for subversive warfare. Every mile of track, both north and south, will be hotly disputed. Both sides realize that control of the railroads will determine the outcome of battles. What an army cannot control, it must destroy. For the first time, artillery is mounted on special railroad cars. 13-inch siege mortars weighing over 7.5 tons are placed on railway flat cars and protected by wooden or metal shields. The weapons are aimed by moving the rail car along a curve on the track until the target is acquired. The armies explore methods of ambushing enemy trains. Derailing trains is a favorite tool of both northern and southern saboteurs. Train crews stay alert for missing rails or piles of ties placed across the tracks, and guards are placed near strategic railroad bridges. The rails themselves are targeted for destruction. Rails are pulled from the ground and placed over a stack of wooden ties. When set afire, the rails contort out of shape and become molten metal. These stacks of ruined rails, called Sherman's neckties, are strewn across the remaining tracks. E.C. Smead of the Union Army Construction Corps invents a set of horseshoe-shaped clamps, which, when attached to rails, twists them in a spiral and renders them unusable. Herman Haupt experiments with bridge demolition, using a torpedo-shaped explosive placed in holes in the wooden trusses. Confederate General Stonewall Jackson, transporting his men on little-known southern railroads, cuts northern supply lines and routs the Union forces protecting the critical Manassas Gap Railroad junction. Union General William Tecumseh Sherman's march through Georgia reduces Confederate railroads to scrap iron and ashes. Freight cars are destroyed by fire, leaving miles of track congested with their ruined frames and their metal wheels. Locomotives are ruined when cannonballs are shot through their boilers. Subversive warfare takes a toll on the combatants as well. The hospital train is introduced for the rapid evacuation of the wounded from the fields of fire, and the United States Military Railroad Hospital is founded. For the next 100 years of railroads at war, armies will develop these pioneering techniques of subversive warfare against trains. Civil War rail-mounted mortars will become the U.S. Navy heavy railway artillery used in World War I. The Union Army's Smead clamps will give birth to the German Army's Scarifier, the track-destroying device of World War II. Bridge demolition, once accomplished by a Confederate soldier's torch, will yield to the time-delayed high explosive used to destroy bridges in Korea. Railroad subversion in the Civil War drags on for 4 years, but in the end, geography is destiny. With almost all of the locomotive factories located in the North, the South cannot replace its wartime losses. Without the use of the railroads, the Confederate rebellion is essentially defeated before the first shot is fired. Sabotage can be as simple as putting sand in this journal box. That was easy. Now that would take out this entire rail car. Or it can be as complicated as putting a time bomb to take out an entire train. That's why men of the military railway system always have to be on guard. The year is 1968. The place? Vietnam at the height of the conflict. Under the watch of American soldiers in this port city, supplies for the United States Army are unloaded. They will be transported by train to American supply depots, then strategically deployed to the armies in the field. These crates contain the supplies that are the Army's essential support: food, clothing, medicine, munitions, radios, and other communications equipment. Security will be the key to their safe delivery. American soldiers and South Vietnamese soldiers and railroad workers combine their skills to deliver the supplies to the railroad. Trucks transport the supplies to the railroad station, which are then placed in freight cars to begin their journey. Massive forklifts called RTs, rough terrain fork trucks, are used to load thousands of pounds of equipment onto flat cars. A train is made up. It consists of freight cars, flat cars, and oil tankers pulled by a diesel locomotive. For 100 years of railroads in wartime, armies have depended on the railroad for logistical support. And in all of these wars, railroad soldiers have been on guard against sabotage. What is at stake here isn't simply rations or weapons. What is at stake here is quite simply life or death. There are no luxuries in times of war. This equipment, this fuel, these munitions must reach their destination, or lives will be lost. This is guerrilla warfare, and the rules of engagement do not apply. You begin your journey down a dangerous road. Even among these friendly faces, the enemy could be concealed. In the eyes of the enemy, your train must be stopped. You know that your cargo is his target. His mission is to stop you at all cost, even at the cost of your life. Every bridge you approach could disappear out from underneath you, collapsing in a ruin of smoke and fire. Every moment you're on this railroad bridge is a test of your belief in your fellow soldiers, in the men who have guarded this bridge and kept it secure from sabotage. It looks okay if no one let his guard down, if no enemy approached under cover of darkness. It looks okay, but you're riding a potential catastrophe on wheels, a train laden with fuel, which could suddenly become a fireball. It only takes a little while to make it across the bridge, but in your mind it seems like hours. The cars roll on, and now the engine is clear. Now the oil drums. Now the troops guarding the cargo. The people passing by look harmless, but you ask yourself, friend or foe? You keep alert for snipers. You scan the track ahead of you for signs of sabotage, the damage that might derail you, the explosives that might destroy your train and kill your men. Charting your route. Closer to your destination, stay alert. You ride an armored car, but you know that's not enough to protect you. You've seen subversive warfare, and there are horrors in your mind's eye. Your destination is finally in sight. Stay alert. Report your arrival to the guards waiting just ahead with a telegraph powered by a hand-crank generator. Enter the rail line. Your mission's complete. You want to rest, but you stay on your guard. In war, there's no safe place. And no train is safe from sabotage.
A good place to wreck a train is in a tunnel. Takes time to clean it up, holds up traffic. The trick is to make the shot after your target gets in the tunnel. The mole takes care of that. The mole is a set of photoelectric equipment which, when plunged into sudden darkness, initiates an explosive charge. It consists of a photoelectric cell, the eye of the mole, a relay unit or amplifier, and a special electric detonator. The photocell, attached by magnets to its target, must be so placed that it can literally see the roadbed. Sensitized by light, this cell builds up an impulse from an accumulation of daylight. And when this light is suddenly removed, as happens when a train goes into a tunnel, the impulse is released and transmitted to the relay unit, where it is amplified into a charge sufficient to detonate the explosive. This electric charge activates the electric detonator, which is inserted in the explosive. Before using the mole, however, a test run was made to find out where to place a charge to get the most complete wreck. Using a four-wheel European-type boxcar, we put about 2 pounds of molded plastic explosive on top of its journal box. You reach the journal box between the pedestal and the wheel. The charge is well hidden there by the pedestal and spring. We put this car on the end of a long train of flat cars, got moving, and for convenience set the shot off electrically from inside the coach. Watch for the explosion on the left-hand side. We put the charge on the forward wheel of that side. It shattered the wheel all right, but didn't wreck the car. The coupling didn't break, and the car dragged several hundred feet before the train's brakes stopped it. The dragging pedestal damaged the ties. The broken wheel. The other wheel on that axle derailed. The rear wheels stayed on the track. It was decided that we could have done more damage if the coupling at the forward end of the car had broken. It's the standard European turnbuckle coupling with hook and link. To make sure of its breaking in the next run, we taped a pound of plastic explosive to the drawbar and put the knotted end of a primacord in it. A charge was placed on the pedestal as before, and the other end of the primacord put in that. The soft metal keepers protecting the magnets of the photocell come off. And to be sure of a good contact for the magnets, it's a good idea to scrape away the paint and rust on the inside of the pedestal. The electric detonator goes into the explosive. The relay unit sits on top of the charge and is fastened down with tape. Pull the arming pin and shove off. The charges are in the forward end of the third boxcar. They were set off by the mole, responding to the darkness of the tunnel. The charges shattered the wheel and part of the coupling, wrecking the train about 125 feet beyond the tunnel. The car carrying the explosive wound up upside down. The 3 cars behind it were completely wrecked. You can see what the drawbar explosion did. It seems apparent, then, that shattering a forward wheel of one of the cars and parting its coupling will wreck a train of European-type cars. To cut the axle, we used a linear-shaped charge containing 6 pounds of cast 50-50 pendolite. The bracket to hold it is made to clamp to the underside of the center sill of a freight car. The charge is secured in the bracket with 3 set screws. A hole takes the special electric detonator, which normally would connect to a mole. The charge was mounted directly over the axle, with its base about 9 inches above the top of the 5-inch axle. The train for the experiment consisted of locomotive and tender, coach, flats, and 2 gondola cars, all empty. It approached at 25 miles per hour. The charge is under the last car, above the rear axle of the front truck. Watch the beating the rear car takes after the axle is broken. The journals work free of the bearings. The airline severed by the explosion sets the brakes on the whole train. One wheel under the middle of the car tangles with the air brake gear, jacking up the rear truck as the train comes to a halt. The journals of the broken axle came out of these empty boxes. The other wheel is jammed under the middle structure. The center sill where the charge blew. We believe that the wreck would have been even more serious if the disabled car had been followed by a train with a heavy load. With the proper detonators and amplifiers, the mole will activate any type of demolition that can be placed on a train. Its purpose is to cause this kind of a mess in a tunnel.
It is the age of warfare on horseback. 2 soldiers place explosive charges on a bridge at its most vulnerable point. This is the Pioneer and Demolition Section of the United States Cavalry. Their objective, the destruction of rail lines, bridges, and telegraph lines, helping to halt the advance of the enemy. Trained in military sabotage, these troops carry demolition equipment. When the bridge is blown after the rear guard crosses, the regiment will know that no form of wheeled transport will be able to pursue them. Objective: to sever the enemy's rail line and to interrupt railroad communications. The war strength of the cavalry consists of 3 squadron sections, each with a corporal and 3 privates, and a sergeant as section chief. Each squadron consists of 3 pack outfits, carried by a pack animal and made up of 2 side loads. These side loads are carried in special hangars and are hung on a Phillips pack saddle. On horseback, the pioneer and demolition section has tremendous range of mobility, regardless of the obstacle. This allows them to pursue objectives that cannot be reached using other forms of transportation. The group, though small, carries a substantial amount of firepower and all of the equipment they need to complete their objectives. This box contains the Pioneer outfit. It contains 4 picks, 2 axes, 1 stone drill, 1 crosscut saw, 6 mining shovels, and 1 sledge. These demolition packs contain 50 pounds of explosives and incidental equipment. Including detonator caps, crimpers, fuses, and a drill. The cavalry uses half-pound blocks of TNT, noted for its great explosive power and remarkable stability. A block of TNT can be carried in a shirt pocket when it is impractical to carry the entire pack. A squadron carefully scouts their target. The regimental commander, having listened to the scouting reports, explains the objectives to his staff. Each squadron section receives its orders. One is detailed to interrupt the main railroad line, and others to destroy the communication lines. TNT offers an effective means of knocking down telegraph poles. Several blocks of the explosive are placed together on one side of the pole and are held securely in place by wrapping tape around the pole and the blocks. The fuse is lighted and the men seek cover. The resulting explosion demolishes the pole and cuts the wires. Another squadron will cut the wires at another location. The lead squadron reaches the railroad track, which it is to destroy. Properly placed, a few blocks of TNT will effectively interrupt rail communication. The charge is prepared. It consists of 2 blocks of TNT staggered on opposite sides of the rail. When detonated, the TNT will cause an explosion that severs the rail. Blocked from going forward, unable to telegraph for a repair crew, the enemy train will waste precious time going backwards to seek help, giving other cavalry squadrons time to complete their missions.
Wrecking trains is serious business. This is possibly the first time that men with explosives have had the opportunity to actually practice sabotaging railroad cars and a locomotive. Because no one wants to carry 100 pounds of explosives on his back, we need to know how little is needed. While she's still in one piece, let's introduce the opponent. The 280 locomotive tips the scales at 53 tons, tender at 49. First two gondolas, gravel-loaded and groaning under a gross weight of 65 tons each. Third gondola, filled with ties, hugging the track with a 40-ton burden. The remaining cars, empty, weigh in at 25. Okay, let's back up here. Have you any ideas on how to wreck a train? Sounds easy, doesn't it? It would be easier on a curve, but we're going to wreck this one with only two 8-ounce charges of plastic explosive on a straightaway. Placed 6 inches apart, they will blow a 12-inch gap in an 85-pound rail. That's strange. Nothing happened. Hardly got a bump out of it. Let's take a telephoto look in slow motion. We would call this 12-inch gap a railroad chuck hole. But not a trap for wrecking trains. Evidently, we didn't place the charges far enough apart. This time we'll blow out two 8-inch gaps and leave a sleeper in between 20 inches long. When 350 tons of rolling freight crashes into this, look out. The locomotive has no steam. She gets a good shove by a pusher engine and coasts down the straight section of the track towards the gap, where something's gone wrong again. The tie under the 20-inch section gives a little, but it won't let go of the rail. The empty cars wobbled, but did not derail. So we'll knock out that 20-inch sleeper. With a 36-inch gap, she'll go caboose over engine. The engine's pilot wheels are only 30 inches in diameter. When they drop off the track, the driving wheels should drop off also. Well, what they should do, they didn't. Only the pilot wheels derailed. The driving wheels rode the gap like a Jeep jumps a rut. The first two ties were broken, but that only made the empties bounce a little more. The 36-inch gap should have done the trick, but what we really need is a gap in both rails. So we'll take a 30-inch section from each track. The two gaps are exactly opposite, and there won't be the tendency of one wheel keeping the other headed back for the rail. Keep your eye on the gaps. That's where she'll wreck. Another dud. Wait a minute. No use going on with this run. Not one single wheel derailed, not even the pilot wheels. Those gaps being exactly opposite each other made the setup too evenly balanced. This time they're staggered with the centers offset 15 inches. Now the wheels will get a twist and decidedly bear off to one side or the other. The gaps can't be seen from here, but it's at the same point. The pilot wheels flipped off again, but that doesn't wreck trains. 5 runs over an assorted pattern of broken tracks. By theory, any one of them should have wrecked her. But there's one fact that we positively know. No train can float over a 58-inch gap. The pilot wheels are 30 inches in diameter, and the driving wheels are 50. Trains run on tracks, not ties. That's simple deduction, with the kind of logic that makes for good train wrecking. This time we'll give our stubborn customer an extra wide berth. She'll hit that open space at 26 miles an hour, and when she does, nothing happens to the engine. Tender, first, second, third, fourth. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. Let's take a closer look at that. Running light, the wheels bounced right off the track, but those are the empties. The loaded cars are still on the track. These cars really hang together. That makes 6 runs, 6 upsets, and 6 theories disproved. We'll try it once more, with 60 inches of rail out of one track and 30 out of the other. The centers of the gaps will be offset by 30 inches. That's a lot of track to blow out, but obviously it can't be wrecked on less. Okay, engineer, give her a hard push. Here she comes, and there go the cars. The tender's front trucks straddled the rail, drifted off the ties, and wrecked the other cars. But the old iron horse just wouldn't bite the dust. We now have a better understanding of why efforts in subversive warfare sometimes fail. By these tests, we have proved that wrecking engines is not easy. To minimize the uncertainties of success in the field, the Office of Strategic Services intends to continue experimental operation.
Italy, October 1943. Behind the lines are the smoldering ruins of a railroad track and miles of twisted railroad ties, pulled from the ground by the subversive weapon known as the Scarifier. Retreating German soldiers work frantically to destroy railroad bridges before they fall into the hands of the Allied armies. After intensive Allied bombing and German demolition, virtually no major railroad bridge has been left undamaged. Thousands of masonry piers are now piles of rubble. This is enemy sabotage. Sometimes, though, the railroad falls victim to friendly fire. June 1950, Seoul, Republic of South Korea. The Han River Bridge, gateway to Seoul, is destroyed by the retreating South Korean army to prevent it from falling into the hands of the invading forces of North Korea. 9 months later, after this capital has changed hands 4 different times, the U.S. 8th Army retakes Seoul from the North Korean invaders. Now the Han River Bridge must be rebuilt so that American troops and equipment can be brought in by railroad to protect the city. Supervising the reconstruction are Lieutenant General James A. Van Fleet, the commanding general of the 8th Army in Korea, and Colonel Pat Strong of the 8th Army Engineers. In less than 3 months, senior U.S. military brass ride the first locomotive as it crosses the Han River Bridge into Seoul. Regardless of which army destroys a bridge, the railroad must go on. In Italy, as in Korea, it is the job of the Corps of Engineers to construct and repair railroad bridges.
We're looking down on the Vol-2 River in Italy, where the enemy has blown up many bridges to stall the forward movement of our troops. The results are vividly illustrated in these scenes, with the Vol-2 presenting an awful panorama of demolished structures. American engineers must push in swiftly and counter the delaying action by constructing new bridges for use by our advancing troops. Various types of fixed bridges are employed. And as we move in to show the first specific job, we find our engineers removing any mines that may have been left by the fleeing enemy. This is naturally of first importance. Now a surveying party makes use of the transit to lay out the center line of the new bridge. Next comes the preparation of the abutment. It is to be emphasized that all the scenes in this film were photographed by combat camera crews. They recorded every operation possible to shoot under the conditions. Engineers unload parts for a Bailey Bridge, a prefabricated portable structure already used extensively in this war. The panels shown here are part of the launching nose. They are held together by panel pins. transoms serve as the supporting beams of the roadway. Before construction is completed, it's necessary to push the partly built launching nose out over the gap. Stringers are placed to support the chest. The latter are held in place by ribbons or curbs, which are bolted down by ribbon bolts in the manner shown. The bridge is then launched by manpower. The need for teamwork cannot be stressed too strongly at this point. The engineers completing the job have been trained in this particular type of work. They know just how to handle any situation. Finally, the new bridge is jacked down into place on its bearings, ready now for use. The Bailey Bridge may also be adapted to other construction methods. For instance, as a railroad bridge of the type shown, a 120-foot triple double type supported at its center by the remains of a demolished pier. Those destroyed piers in the distance represent what was once a 1,200-foot bridge. Reconstructing the old bridge would be a job requiring too much time, so the engineers proceed as follows. Temporary bridges are built, such as this 140-foot triple single Bailey, reinforced by 4 bays of double-story construction. Floating as well as fixed bridges are employed. And here we see one of the temporary ponton bridges, built so that heavy equipment can be moved over the river. As for the new 1,200-foot bridge, it was constructed first as a single Bailey and launched by hand over rocking rollers on each pier. It was then converted to a double single truss. A problem of supply sometimes presents itself. The Bailey Bridge equipment is needed in a forward area. So, here a trestle bridge is built underneath the Bailey. The Bailey equipment can then be removed and carried forward for bridge construction elsewhere in the combat zone. No obstacle is too difficult to surmount. Right now, we see retaining walls being backfilled with rock to form an abutment. It's the beginning of an operation made necessary when the approach to a bridge has to be extended to shorten the length of the gap. The A-frame on the bumper of this truck is used as a crane to move logs and stringers into place. The retaining wall is tied into the bank by headers and guy wires, with railroad rails used to help hold the wall. Construction on the timber trestle bench goes on while the abutments are prepared. Local labor is brought in to help finish the job. The men are assigned to build masonry revetments around the bottom of the trestle bench. Protection is provided for the concrete while it's setting. They can relax now, for the bridge is ready. So the engineers carry out their assignments on many fronts, constructing countless new bridges with skill and speed.
It's September of 1918, and the theater of war spreads across all of Europe. For the last 4 years, there have been long standoffs, bloody offensives, and prolonged counteroffensives. With no single front line, an army must be mobile, and heavy railway artillery has changed the very nature of warfare. The U.S. Naval Railway Battery, the Allied response to the huge German artillery, leaves the railway shop at Saint-Nazaire. Accompanied by the French railway guns, the American railway artillery moves out to mount an offensive against German-held bases and positions. The United States Navy has 5 14-inch railway-mounted guns. Guns 1 and 2, manned by American crews, are sent out to supplement French guns northeast of Paris. The first American target is Tournier, an important German-held railroad junction. It is here that the first American gun crew will fire the first American gun at a German target. French soldiers unload shells and powder bags from a specially fitted-out munitions car. The French railway gun is the sliding type, meaning that the entire mechanism slides back on the track upon firing to disperse recoil shock. Because of this movement, the ammunition car is kept far enough away from the railway gun to avoid an accidental collision. Shells are brought to the gun by means of a shuttle car. The equalizing apparatus on the shuttle car allows for the rapid lading of shells, weighing up to 2,200 pounds. The shells are hoisted up onto the loading mechanism. Two men move the shell down an overhead trolley, where it is eased into the breech. This is the screw-type breech, which permits rapid reloading. When loaded, a brass cartridge case prevents dangerous propellant gases from escaping. The railway gun is elevated and the target is acquired. When fired, the gun slides back on the track from 10 to 15 feet. It will have to be repositioned before it can again fire on enemy positions. The year is 1918, the place Verdun, France. The U.S. Navy has deployed 5 great guns in the field, similar to dreadnought turret guns. Guns 3, 4, and 5 are here. Today, their target is a railroad junction. The Great War has seen unprecedented growth in the mobility of artillery. It accompanies the foot soldier, supports the cavalry, attacks fortresses, defends coastlines, and now, with the use of railway mounting, heavy railway artillery has become the battleship of the field, capable of firing 1,400-pound projectiles for a distance of nearly 25 miles. These gun crews, traveling with a rail-mounted battery, are quartered in the train, which carries berthing and kitchen facilities. Here, the Commander-in-Chief of the Atlantic Fleet, Admiral Mayo, and his staff inspect the battery. These guns are pit-mounted. Work crews move ahead of the guns, digging pits and laying rails across pit foundation materials. The mounting is then bolted to a heavy cast bed plate, which prevents the gun train from sliding back on the track when the gun is fired. Recoil shock is dispersed into the pit foundation. A 14-inch shell weighing 1,400 pounds is unloaded from the ammunition car. Overhead, an Allied aviator returns from a reconnaissance flight behind German lines. Ammunition cars are moved away from the guns. A small stand of trees serves as camouflage for the artillery train. The reconnaissance plane signals the range and direction of the enemy's target via wireless communication. A signalman hurries the wireless message to the fire control car. Fire control, which has telephone to each gun, will coordinate the assault. Large cloth panels are placed on the ground to signal the aviator. The message, ready to fire. Gun 3 prepares to fire. The aviator clears the area of artillery fire. Fire control telephones gun 4. Elevation, 43 degrees. Range, 23.9 miles. The gun is elevated. The breech end swings down into the pit as the gun is positioned. The Gun 5 signalman receives his instruction. Direction, elevation, range, all ready. Stand by. Prepare to fire. The command is given. Gun 3, fire. Gun 4, fire. 3, fire. 4, fire. Gun 5, fire. Fire, fire, fire. And now the balance of battle has changed. The U.S. naval railway batteries have caused widespread destruction of the German-held rail junction. The bombardments have destroyed the railroad supply lines. Cut off from reinforcements and rations, the Germans have been forced to retreat. There are two ways of looking at heavy railway artillery. If you're firing it at your enemy, it's one of the best weapons you can have. But if your enemy's firing at you, it's one of the weapons you fear the most. In either case, there's many casualties in the cause and effect of war. Fall 1944. Paris has been liberated, and the German army, squeezed between Allied armies in Italy, France, and Russia, engages in increasingly frantic efforts to protect its dwindling territory. Soon little will be left except the fatherland itself, if the Allies can be kept from crossing the Rhine River. Under cover of camouflage netting, the artillery has slept. Now it comes alive, ready once again to answer the call of war. With captured French railway artillery, with Germany's own massive railway guns, with rail-mounted coast defense guns, the German army stages a desperate defense. The heavy railway artillery, which caused such incredible destruction in World War I, is now an old soldier, all but obsolete since airplanes became the weapons of choice for heavy bombardment in this Second World War. Its age, however, has not affected its power. The sons of the Third Reich strain under the weight of 1,000-pound shells, with slave labor augmenting their efforts. In all heavy guns, the weight of the shell directly relates to its destructive power. The gun itself is the machine which delivers the shell's destructive force. A locomotive with tens of thousands of pounds of tractive effort hauls forth another artillery behemoth. Now is revealed the descendant of the Paris gun, one of the most powerful pieces of heavy railway artillery of the previous war. The huge barrel strains skyward. The direction and distance are set. Across many miles, the gun rains death and injury on the unseen opponent. In the far distance, untold damage is suffered. Another gun is laid. Again and again, the railway artillery is reloaded. Spent shells litter the landscape. The German soldiers follow their shots, hoping that the advance has been stopped. In this awesome display of firepower, a low groan is heard. It comes not from the Allied forces, but from the last remaining Axis power. It is the death rattle of the German military machine. The front line, Toul, France, 1918. For these sons of America, the rail line is a lifeline, the line to healing, the line away from the rigors of battle. The rail line has brought them to the evacuation hospital to be treated with care by their brothers in arms. Here a hospital train waits for them, waits to take them away from the noise and the pain and the closeness of death. One by one they come. Some borne on the shoulders of their comrades, some struggling, except a friendly hand. On and on they come. America's hope for a future which at last promises peace. 250,000 wounded. Men who have laid their bodies on the altar of freedom, now in need of a healing hand. Here in the hospital train, they will find the doctor who will aid them and the corpsman who will tend them. The doors are closed on the years of battle. And now the railroad, which has carried these boys across distant lands, which has supported them through the years of combat, which has seen them grow into men as they fought to defend liberty, carries them to healing, carries them to freedom. Carries them back to loved ones, waiting silently by the door. At last, at long last, the war train carries them home.